Are you feeling frustrated waiting upon God? Are you feeling like God has forgotten about you and all of the things that He promised to you, or at least you thought He promised them to you? Things that He revealed to you while you listened, to a sermon preached, you had a dream, you had somebody just, confirm in your life a gifting they see, you felt called to be, you know, called to the ministry within your church, called to a certain job, career, maybe called to a different a certain relationship, whatever it is. But you feel maybe like you've been waiting for so long for the answer, for the breakthrough, for to finally see what God has promised, what God has in store for your life. And I know full well that can be a very frustrating process. It can be a very upsetting season to walk through of just waiting upon God. Sometimes you think it should go a certain way, but it doesn't go that way. And then you get angry even towards God, saying, God, this makes sense. What I think makes sense. It worked for them, it worked for other people. So that makes sense. That's the way that you should do it in my life. But the Bible says that God's ways are higher than our ways, and God's thoughts are different than our thoughts. And so, what God sees for you is different than what you see for you. And you have to be willing to submit to that. And that's where it gets very hard. I think of the story in the Bible of Joseph, and Joseph had many brothers. And Joseph, at the age of 17, God gave him a dream. And the dream was a dream. He had a couple of dreams, and both of them revealed to Joseph that he was going to be in a position of great authority, and people, including his brothers and family, would bow down to his authority, to his leadership. And I mean, as a young man, that excited Joseph, and he told his brothers, and they were jealous of Joseph because his father loved Joseph the most, which is wrong for any dad to do. You don't want to have favoritism towards your kids. And so his brothers decide, after Joseph has these amazing dreams from God, God's calling me to leadership. God's calling me to a position of great authority. And he's probably so excited. In fact, he was. And then next thing you know, the Bible says that his brothers, because they were jealous and they despised Joseph, they considered killing him. But then they thought, instead of killing him, let's make money off of his life. So they sold him as a slave in Egypt. And so Joseph, now given these dreams by God, is now a slave in Egypt, and he's a slave for a man named Potiphar in his house. And God shows him favor in Potiphar's house as Potiphar's servant. And Potiphar gives him responsibility, authority over everything except, certain things. But most things in Potiphar's house, Joseph had the authority over. He was in control over it. And and then if you know the story, Potiphar's wife, when Potiphar was at work, Joseph was in Potiphar's house doing his work for Potiphar, and his wife had eyes for Joseph and tried to seduce him to sleep with him. And Joseph resisted and said, "No, I won't do this. I have a great call here from your husband. I'm responsible before God. How could I sin against God like that?" And next thing you know, Potiphar's wife lies and says that Joseph tried to grape her, rather. And I say the word grape because YouTube doesn't like the other word. But you know what I'm talking about. Take advantage of her, mistreat her. And that was a lie. And Joseph is now thrown in prison after being in a high position in Potiphar's house. Now, I would imagine, and the Bible doesn't say this, but I wonder if when Joseph was serving Potiphar in this great position, I mean, he had such authority, and honor given to him by Potiphar, I wonder if he thought, this is it. This is the dream. This is that leadership position that God showed me many years prior when I was 17. But now I'm accused of something I didn't do and thrown in prison for it. So Joseph's on this roller coaster ride where he's given this dream, he's sold as a slave, he's promoted as a servant in Potiphar's house, and now he's lied about, thrown in prison. It's this up and down roller coaster ride that Joseph seems to be on. And I'm sure you and I can relate with that. It's like the seasons of life, they go all over the place as you follow God. And Joseph was probably now sitting in his prison cell thinking, Lord, I thought that was it. I thought that was the call that you had for my life based on that dream you gave to me, Lord. And so God was with Joseph throughout this whole time, including in the prison cell. And he was there for a couple of years. And the other jailer gets released and forgets about Joseph. And Joseph's in prison by himself, forgotten about by the other prison, prisoner who is now free. And next thing you know, and I'm making the story short, Pharaoh sends for Joseph because he has a dream that he wants Joseph to interpret. And so after being in jail for a couple of years, now he's standing before Pharaoh of Egypt, and he is able, by the gifting of God on his life, to interpret the dream that Pharaoh tells him. And now Pharaoh promotes him as the second highest authority under Pharaoh over all of Egypt. And God uses Joseph in that position of authority, which was the dream come true. It was the dream that God gave to him, the two dreams that God showed him of authority. He was now in that position. So he goes from the prison up into the palace. He's promoted. And it's all part of God's plan and time, and it was perfect. It wasn't supposed to be in Potiphar's house. The promotion of the dream that God gave Joseph was this promotion as top leader under Pharaoh over Egypt. And God used Joseph to help Egypt get through some difficult times of famine. And then of course, God reunites Joseph with his brothers, and Joseph says, the thing that you meant for harm, God meant for good. And so, gentlemen, and whoever's listening or watching this, be encouraged that if you feel like God's forgotten you, he hasn't. He's preparing you for the right time. He's preparing you right now in Potiphar's house, in the jail cell, in the season where it feels like you're alone. You're not. God's there. He's just preparing you for the palace. He's preparing you for what he has in store for you specifically. And he knows when you're ready. He knows when I'm ready. I'm still waiting on things in my life that I thought I would see years ago. I'm still waiting, but I trust God's time. And so be encouraged with that story of Joseph, that it was the right time and the right way. There was a process. There was a process of preparation that God had to take Joseph through to prepare him for that position of authority in the palace under Pharaoh. So be encouraged with that. Hold your ground, stay the course, stay faithful to God, stay faithful in those little things that he's calling you to do, and trust him for the right time for your promotion.